Before Clint Eastwood became the man Hollywood treated like granite, before the squint, before the poncho, before Dirty Harry's stare, before the Oscars, before the director's chair, before the world decided he was impossible to erase, he was just a young soldier in a broken military plane watching the Pacific Ocean rise toward him. No music, no camera, no heroic close-up, just metal shaking, fuel gone, instruments failing, and a sky that suddenly had no mercy. The plane hit the water hard enough to turn the world silent. And when Clint Eastwood came back up, there was no rescue boat waiting beside him. There was only cold water, a distant shoreline, and a decision that had nothing to do with fame. Swim or disappear. But here's the strange part. That crash was not the moment that came closest to erasing Clint Eastwood from history. The ocean nearly killed his body. Hollywood almost killed the legend. Because years later, after he survived the Pacific, after he came home, after he walked into studios hoping someone might see something in him, the industry looked at Clint Eastwood and basically said, "No. Too stiff. Too quiet. Too awkward. Wrong face. Wrong voice. Wrong energy. Not enough." And if he had believed them, cinema would be missing one of its most recognizable faces. There would be no Man with No Name, no Dirty Harry, no Unforgiven, no $1 Million Baby, no 90-year-old filmmaker still walking onto a set when most careers had become old photographs. So this is not just the story of Clint Eastwood becoming famous. This is the story of a man who kept getting rejected by the next room, then somehow ended up owning the whole building. And stay with this, because the most important twist in his life is not that he proved Hollywood wrong. It is that he used everything Hollywood disliked about him and turned it into the thing audiences could not stop watching. The silence they called empty became danger. The stiffness they called bad acting became control. The face they thought was wrong became a monument, and the man they almost dismissed became one of the longest-lasting forces American film has ever produced. Clint Eastwood Jr. was born in San Francisco in 1930 into a country still living under the shadow of the Great Depression. His family moved around when he was young, following work and stability the way millions of families did during that era. Different places. Different routines. Different versions of the same lesson: nothing is promised, and comfort can vanish faster than people think. That matters, because Eastwood did not grow up like someone waiting for the world to clap for him. He grew up like someone learning to conserve energy. He was tall early, quiet early, watchful early. Not the kind of kid who needed to dominate a room, more the kind who studied it, measured it, and decided whether it was worth speaking at all. And that quality would become crucial later. Because Clint Eastwood's greatest weapon was never just the gun in the westerns. It was the pause before the gun, the look before the line, the silence that made other people nervous. But when he was young, nobody saw that as screen presence. They saw a tall, reserved young man who did odd jobs and drifted through the edges of ordinary life. He worked as a lifeguard. He carried groceries. He caddied. He took physical work because physical work was available, and it did not require anybody to imagine a future for him. Then came the Army. During the Korean War era, Eastwood was drafted and stationed at Fort Ord in California. Because he was a strong swimmer, he served as a swimming instructor. It sounds almost too neat now. Like life was quietly preparing him for the moment he did not know was coming. Then in 1951, while traveling on a military aircraft, the plane ran into serious trouble and went down near the California coast. Think about that for a second. Not as trivia. Not as a fun fact in a celebrity biography. Think of a young man in his early 20s suddenly dropped into the ocean, with the shore far away. His future unwritten, and nobody on earth yet knowing that the person in that water would one day become Clint Eastwood. At that point, he was not a legend fighting for survival. He was just a life. And that is the first key to understanding him. The world did not owe him a dramatic rescue. He had to move. Stroke after stroke, minute after minute. Cold water, salt, exhaustion, fear, and the tiny light of the shore becoming the only argument against death. He made it. And most people would treat that kind of experience like the defining miracle of a lifetime. But for Eastwood, it became something quieter. Not a public brand, not a speech, not a heroic costume. Just another private lesson: panic wastes energy. Keep moving. After his service, he drifted toward Los Angeles, but not with the polished hunger of someone raised for the business. He was not a theater school prodigy with a perfect plan. He was a tall guy with looks, uncertainty, and a few people telling him he might have a shot. Universal gave him a contract, and for a moment it looked like the door had opened. But the door only opened enough to show him how small he was. His earliest roles were tiny, sometimes barely there. A lab assistant, a background part, a face in a B-movie, the kind of work where your family has to squint to recognize you on screen. And the feedback was not encouraging. He was told in one way or another that he did not fit. He was too slow with his lines, too rigid, too unusual. The industry wanted a different kind of leading man, cleaner, smoother, more obviously charming, more instantly expressive. Eastwood had the opposite problem. He looked like a man who had already heard the question and decided not to answer. That would become iconic later. At the time, it made executives nervous. Then came the professional drowning. Universal let him go. Not with a dramatic explosion, not with a famous argument, just the quiet cruelty of Hollywood paperwork. A contract not renewed, a dream placed back outside the gate. And this is where most stories about success lie to you. They make rejection sound inspirational after the ending is already known. But in the moment, rejection does not feel like destiny. It feels like evidence. A studio says no, and suddenly every insecurity becomes louder. Maybe they are right. Maybe you are not an actor. Maybe the camera does not want you. Maybe the thing you thought was uniqueness is actually just a flaw. And for Clint Eastwood, this was not rejection at 18 with all the time in the world. He was already in his 20s. Married, broke enough for every decision to matter. Watching other actors move ahead while he circled through small parts and auditions that went nowhere. This is the first version of Clint Eastwood that most people never picture. Not the legend, not the tough guy. A struggling actor trying to survive the embarrassment of almost making it. And yet, he stayed. That may sound simple, but it is the entire story. He stayed long enough for luck to find him again. The next doorway was television. In 1959, Clint Eastwood became Rowdy Yates on Rawhide. Suddenly, he had what every struggling actor wants: steady work, national exposure, a recognizable face, a paycheck, a reason to believe the struggle was over. Except, it was not over. It was a better cage. Rawhide made him known, but it also trapped him inside a version of himself he did not fully respect. He was the young cowboy, the TV cowboy, the reliable face on a weekly western. Millions saw him, but Hollywood still did not quite see him. That is a very dangerous kind of success, because failure forces you to move. Comfort convinces you to stay. For years, Eastwood worked the long hours of television production. Early calls, repeated setups, dust, horses, dialogue, routine. He learned the mechanics of filming by being inside the machine every day. He watched directors. He watched crews. He watched how time was wasted and how scenes were built. And while the industry thought he was just an actor in a cowboy show, Eastwood was quietly studying the job he actually wanted. He wanted control. He wanted to direct. He wanted to make decisions, not just wait for them. But Rawhide would not give him that chance. He was valuable as a product, not trusted as an artist. And then came one of the strangest turning points in Hollywood history. An Italian director named Sergio Leone was making a Western, not in Hollywood, not with a big American studio machine, in Spain with European money on a project many established American stars would have considered beneath them. A Fistful of Dollars was not supposed to rewrite cinema. It was supposed to be a low-budget Western with style, grit, and a lead actor affordable enough to say yes. Eastwood said yes, and this is where the rejection became useful, because Sergio Leone did not need Clint Eastwood to be smooth. He needed him to be unreadable. Leone did not need big speeches. He needed silence. He did not need a polished American hero. He needed a human question mark in a poncho. Eastwood brought pieces of himself to the character. The hat, the look, the minimal movement, the sense that every line had to fight its way out of his mouth. Instead of trying to hide what Hollywood had criticized, he sharpened it. The slow delivery became tension. The narrowed eyes became danger. The stillness became myth. Audiences did not need him to explain himself. They leaned in because he refused to. That is the lesson most creators miss. Sometimes your weakness is only a weakness in the wrong room. Put it in the right story, and it becomes your signature. A Fistful of Dollars, then for a few dollars more. Then the good, the bad, and the ugly turned Eastwood into an international star. Not a television cowboy anymore. Not an almost leading man. An icon. But even that victory came with a strange delay. The American industry did not instantly bow down. Critics were unsure. The films were labeled with a phrase that sounded almost dismissive: spaghetti westerns. Cheap, foreign, violent, stylized, not respectable enough for serious approval. And once again, Eastwood was standing in the space between popularity and respect. The audience understood before the gatekeepers did. That pattern followed him for decades. By the late 1960s, Clint Eastwood had what he had been denied before: box office value. He was not just recognizable, he was bankable. And bankability is the language Hollywood understands even when it refuses to understand anything else. Then came Dirty Harry. In 1971, Eastwood became Inspector Harry Callahan, a San Francisco cop with a stare colder than most villains and a moral code that made audiences cheer and critics argue. Dirty Harry was not just a movie. It was a cultural event, a line in the sand, a character people either admired, feared, criticized, or quoted. And here is the problem with playing a role that powerful. It can make you immortal. It can also bury you alive, because suddenly the world thinks it knows you. The tough man, the gun, the squint, the threat, the one-liner. The audience sees the mask and starts believing the mask is the man. Eastwood understood something important. If he only kept feeding that image, it would eventually consume him. He would become a brand before he became an artist. A successful brand, maybe a rich brand, but still a cage. So the same year Dirty Harry made him even bigger, he stepped behind the camera. Play Misty for Me was not the kind of directorial debut people might have expected from a Western and action star. It was a psychological thriller, intimate, tense, controlled. It was not about proving he could make himself look heroic. It was about proving he could handle mood, fear, pacing, and vulnerability. That film mattered because it revealed the second Clint Eastwood, the one behind the stare, the one who did not want to wait for permission anymore. He built his own production company, Malpaso, and over time turned it into a base of operations. That was not just a business move. It was a survival move. The actor who had been dismissed by a studio created a structure where he could protect his instincts from studio fear. And the way he directed reflected the way he lived. Fast, lean, quiet, no unnecessary drama, no endless searching for perfection until the scene died from overhandling. Eastwood became known for an economical style. Fewer takes, calm sets, trust in the moment. To some people, that looked casual. To actors, it could feel freeing. To studios, it looked miraculous, because he often brought films in efficiently. He understood something most desperate artists forget: creative freedom is easier to defend when you do not waste everyone's money. But then, another private event changed him. In 1970, Eastwood's father died of a heart attack at 64. For a man who seemed built out of restraint, the loss hit deeply. And after that, people around him noticed he worked with even more urgency. It was as if time had stopped being an abstract idea. He had seen the limit. He knew there was no guarantee of a long second half. So he moved. Film after film, role after role. Not all perfect, not all praised, some strange, some commercial, some misunderstood, but always moving. High Plains Drifter, The Outlaw Josie Wales, Every Which Way But Loose, Escape from Alcatraz, Tightrope, Pale Rider, Bird, White Hunter, Black Heart, The Bridges of Madison County. You can feel him testing the walls of his own image, sometimes leaning into the myth, sometimes damaging it on purpose, sometimes walking away from what audiences expected so he could find out what else was still alive inside him. And then came the film that changed the meaning of everything before it. Unforgiven, by 1992, Clint Eastwood had spent decades as one of cinema's great gunfighters. His face had become part of Western mythology. The audience had been trained to understand what an Eastwood Western meant: danger, revenge, silence, justice arriving with a weapon. Then he made a Western that looked straight at that mythology and asked, what if all of that was a lie people tell because the truth is too ugly? Unforgiven is not just another Western. It is an older man walking back into the genre that made him famous and refusing to romanticize it. The violence is not clean. The hero is not pure. The legend is not glamorous. The past is not gone. That is why the film feels like a conversation between young Eastwood and older Eastwood. The man with no name created the myth. William Money buried it. And that is why the Oscar wins mattered. Not because awards define greatness, but because the industry that once looked at Eastwood and saw a problem now had to stand up and honor him as a filmmaker. Best Director. Best Picture. A career that began with tiny roles in Rejection had reached the center of Hollywood's most prestigious stage. For many people, that would have been the perfect ending. Clint Eastwood did not treat it like an ending. That is what separates long careers from legendary ones. A long career survives. A legendary career keeps changing after it has already won. In the 1990s and 2000s, Eastwood could have lived safely inside legacy. He could have made comfortable films, accepted tribute after tribute, and slowly turned into an honored museum piece. Instead, his work grew darker, sadder, more reflective. Mystic River was not about a hero cleaning up the streets. It was about trauma spreading through lives like poison. Million Dollar Baby was not a sports movie in the simple inspirational sense. It was about ambition, love, guilt, dignity, and the kind of choice that leaves no one untouched. And when Million Dollar Baby won Best Picture and Eastwood won Best Director again, the achievement carried a different weight. He was not being rewarded for nostalgia. He was being rewarded for still being dangerous as an artist in his 70s. Think about that. Most actors spend their later years trying to remind audiences of who they used to be. Eastwood kept forcing audiences to deal with who he still was. That is why his career is so hard to categorize. He was a Western icon, then an action icon, then a director, then an Oscar-winning director, then an old master, then, somehow, still working. Gran Torino arrives, and suddenly he is confronting the aging of his own image again, the growl, the anger, the hard man with a world changing around him. American Sniper arrives and becomes a massive commercial success, proving that even in his 80s Eastwood could still direct a film that dominated the cultural conversation. and through all of it, the same pattern repeats. People assume the final chapter has arrived. He keeps adding pages. That is why Juror #2 feels so fascinating. A courtroom thriller released when Eastwood was already in his 90s, directed by a man whose career began before many modern filmmakers' parents were born. Whether people call it a late work, a possible farewell, or another chapter, the existence of the film itself is almost unbelievable. Not because every late film must be a masterpiece, but because the act of making it is part of the story. A man who survived a plane crash in 1951 is still, more than 70 years later, building moral traps on screen. Still asking questions about guilt. Still interested in what people do when the easy answer is no longer available. Still refusing to become only a memory. And this is where the story becomes bigger than Clint Eastwood. Because his life is not a simple motivational poster. It is not believe in yourself and everything works out. That is too easy. Clint Eastwood's story is harsher and more useful than that. Sometimes you survive the ocean and still get rejected. Sometimes you get the job and it becomes a cage. Sometimes fame arrives wearing the wrong costume. Sometimes the thing that makes you rich threatens to make you small. Sometimes the world rewards you for a mask, and then you have to fight the world for the right to take it off. Eastwood's genius was not that he avoided being trapped. He was trapped several times. He was trapped as the failed contract actor, then as the television cowboy, then as the spaghetti western gunman, then as Dirty Harry, then as the aging tough guy people thought they understood. Each time, he found a way to use the trap as material. That is the real art. Not escaping your past. Rewriting what your past means. The silent young man became a screen presence. The rejected actor became a star. The star became a director. The director became a critic of his own myth. The old man became proof that age can narrow the body without narrowing the work. And maybe that is why Eastwood's career still feels so heavy in the culture. It is not just the films. It is the feeling that he kept outlasting every verdict placed on him. Hollywood said he did not fit. He became the shape other actors copied. Television made him famous, but limited. He used it as a film school. The Western made him a myth. He used Unforgiven to question the myth. Age tried to move him out of the frame. He moved behind the camera and stayed there. There is something almost stubbornly simple about it. He did not always explain. He did not always apologize for being hard to categorize. He did not constantly reinvent himself in loud public statements. He just made the next thing. And then the next. And then the next. That is why the image of the young Eastwood in the water matters so much. Because it was not the last time he had to swim toward a light nobody else could see. When Universal let him go, he had to swim. When Rawhide boxed him in, he had to swim. When serious critics dismissed the Westerns, he had to swim. When Dirty Harry threatened to turn him into only a symbol, he had to swim. When people assumed his best years were behind him, he had to swim. And when most artists would have stopped, he kept moving through a different kind of ocean, time. That may be the most impressive survival story of all, not the crash, the career. Because many people survive a terrible day. Far fewer survive 60 years of being misunderstood, used, praised for the wrong reasons, criticized for the right ones, rewarded late, doubted again, and still keep creating. So when people ask what made Clint Eastwood different, the easy answer is presence. The better answer is endurance. Presence made people watch. Endurance made them keep watching for decades. And maybe the final lesson is this. The world may be wrong about you, but it may also take years to prove it. Not days. Not one lucky break. Years of staying when quitting would make sense. Years of learning when the work feels beneath you. Years of turning rejection into style. Years of becoming so undeniable that the same industry that once saw your flaws has to call them iconic. Clint Eastwood did not become Clint Eastwood because nobody doubted him. He became Clint Eastwood because doubt never got the final word. The ocean did not get it. Universal did not get it. Typecasting did not get it. Age did not get it. And Hollywood, after all those years, had to accept the truth it missed at the beginning. That quiet man was never empty. He was loaded. And he was waiting for the right moment to fire. So the next time you see the squint, the poncho, the badge, the director sitting calmly behind the camera, remember the part that came first. A young man in cold water. A distant light. No applause, no guarantee. Only the choice to keep moving. That is where the legend really begins. And maybe that is why Clint Eastwood lasted longer than almost anyone expected. He never stopped swimming.